Hi, I'm Jennifer Schlickburn here with Maggie of ThinkerThemer. We all love ThinkerThemer.
Yeah.
It's always so great to get those two different per- perspectives. And this is the second blog regarding representation for marginalized people in board games. So I want to kind of well, a couple of things. One, I promised you guys better audio. I bought a really good microphone and I bought a really good webcam, and my son and I spent 2 hours trying to get them to work this afternoon. So next time. And I also want to discuss just a little bit about why representation matters and how representation has affected people of color. Back in the 40s, when Jackie Robinson first started playing for the Dodgers, every black person in America knew exactly what he'd done at the plate and in the field that day. Everyone. Oh, what did Jackie do? Oh, man, he hit a home run. Can and to have him on TV where they could watch him meant so much. You know, it was vitally important. And the other kind of little story, although I didn't look it up and I should have, but I was talking with a Japanese gentleman, probably in his 70s, and he was saying that in the late 50s and 60s, they watched every Star Trek episode because
Mm.
there was a Japanese guy on the episode. And so, that was all part of the community, right?
Mm.
Is to see how he did and, how the story went. And they were huge Star Trek fans, not necessarily because of the science fiction, but because of the representation. So, we want to well, I can't make people understand, but I would hope that people can understand. And I know that white people sometimes can be dismissive, but that's because they see themselves everywhere, right? I mean, there's not a TV show or a commercial or a news or anything that doesn't have a white person in it, right? So, when you're of color, then it can be more significant when you're brought to the forefront. So, um, okay, so Maggie is from Venezuela, and we're going to be talking about Latin American representation. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Unfortunately, one day maybe we'll be talking about Venezuelan representation. But
Yeah,
right
more
now,
specifically. Yeah.
right now we got to deal with the continent in Central America and Mexico because there's
Mm.
so little, right? All right. So is representation something that you've always looked at when you buy a game? Or maybe it's come to you as you become more familiar with the hobby, or even as the Black Lives Matter movement became more prominent?
So first off, thank you for having me on this
Thank
chat
you for
or this
coming. I'm like,
conversation.
I'm
It's really
getting
great
a
to.
movie star. Oh
Oh,
my.
please. Far too kind, far too generous. So yeah, no, I'm excited to have this conversation, obviously, because I think it's a very important and growing part of the hobby. I think particularly over the last couple of years, with everything that's been happening, there's been a big growth in the awareness of all of us in a lot of different areas. So I think that has obviously that's painted or influenced how we look at not just board games, but everything that
Right.
any type of content that we consume, any type of how we approach things, how we have conversations, with friends or in a work setting. So I think there's been we kind of have to acknowledge that this is not something that's just kind of happened. Um,
No.
yeah, it's been a big shift in a lot of different areas. I think if I'm really honest with myself, like the concept of representation is probably more on my mind of recent because of this awareness. So I
Right.
think in the past, I wouldn't I agree that it's like seeing myself represented, and obviously being a member of the LGBTQI plus community.
Right.
That was it for me. Like seeing a gay character in mainstream media was like, oh wow. For the longest time, it was always kind of painted in a, you knew that character was either gonna die by the end of it, or there was gonna be
Right.
some sort of moral kind of story of
Something
how, like,
terrible, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
something terrible would
Right.
happen. So
Yeah.
when that started to shift, and you would cherish, the couple of movies or the couple of instances where you would see those characters, and you'd watch them over and over again. Now obviously that's shifted. We have so much more representation in media as well. But I think, yeah, for the longest time we hadn't, I've probably been in the board gaming hobby now close to a decade, I think. And yeah, when it first, it kind of feels like it was a very different time when we first, when I kind of went into the hobby initially. And yeah, I wasn't really looking for a game specifically because of, does this have South America in it? Do I see myself represented in it? You're very much kind of going into it going, I love board games.
Right.
What's the theme in this? What are you doing? What kind of world are you stepping into? And there wasn't really that awareness. So it wasn't really a priority. As things have shifted, and as we've been more and more spoiled with so many more and new games that come out, every day, and so many new themes, is like, well, now the bar is, and obviously the awareness across the globe in terms of all these other, marginalized groups or underrepresented groups, the bar is going up and up. And so now my expectations of games, particularly if you're going to be touching, a subject that is like, well, this is a particular culture, or you're trying to represent or celebrate a culture. It's like, well, you want it to be done well. It's no longer good enough to be like, well, I'm glad to get any sort of spotlight,
Right, yeah,
even if it's
exactly.
inaccurate. It's like,
Exactly.
well, now we
Yeah.
can look at it more closely. So I think initially, no, that wasn't one of my things kind of going into it, but definitely, yeah, for the longest time, even just female or female presenting characters in games
Right.
were rare.
Mhm.
Like it was all,
Exactly.
male
Or
characters.
or female characters that weren't attached to a male.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, correct. Almost
yeah.
like a backup or a support as opposed to
Right,
being,
yeah.
the main character.
Exactly, Maggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know for myself, it hasn't always been an issue. I look back, as you may know, I'm one of the designers of Advanced Civ, and I look back at that and I look at it as a missed opportunity to have brought in more context, more representation into that game. But at the time, it's like, you just go with the whole European, narrative, and you're not even aware at the time that you're really doing that. And if I were doing it again, it wouldn't look tremendously different, but it would definitely have a different context. I mean, particularly with the barbarians, right? Barbarians are the ones who lost. So, So, did George Floyd's murder have an impact on how you looked at representation?
I think that was definitely a catalyst for the world, I think, in terms of how we looked at particularly race and how we interact with race. But also, I think we kind of reached a point, and it's been gradually, because we kind of saw it even with the Me Too movement of things that were they just went on the way, like that's just the way things are for so long. And then somehow, like we kind of reached this point where people went, you know what? No, it doesn't have to be this way. No. Why? And enough is enough. And so I think all of those events have, again, it sort of impacted this awareness of how it's woken us up to going, yeah, why are we just accepting the status quo if we don't even believe that that's what's necessarily the best? And or why aren't we creating something that can be way better for more of us?
Positive and more, because at the end of the day, some people just don't realize this, but the more people of color you get into the hobby, the more money everybody makes and the more games everybody gets.
The more variety we have of everything, like the more games, the more options, the more, the more the industry gets to thrive. So it's not, sometimes there's this sort of fear of like, oh, you're going to take my games away. And that is not it. Like, we love the games as well. Like, we don't want the games so we take it away.
Them.
We want, well, most of it. Yes. Yeah. So it's like, we want more games. We want more, and we want really good quality games. We want more voices going into the game. So it's not the same, set of mechanics, just reskinned and overly skinned and new skin and new. It's like and you only really get that creativity and that variety the more people and the more voices and the more perspectives you add into the hobby. Yeah,
exactly. Now, we don't see much Latin American representation in the BGG top 100, which I'm using as an arbitrary, Okay, it feels like the bigger publishers have said, well, Board and Dice is doing, Tekenyu and Teotihuacan and Soken, so that's their shtick, and we can just keep doing Catherine the Great, and no one's going to care.
Yeah,
but we do care.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And I think, and again, it's one of those. Even with with those games, we've learned from those. I mean, even the designers of those games have acknowledged how there have been errors. Again, because the whole concept of including a cultural consultant wasn't really a thing until fairly recently.
Right.
And so again, it's one of those areas where, again, we're all learning, and we're all, and when I say we, it's us as consumers of games and gamers and players of games, but also designers. Yeah, content creators as well. Yeah. But designers are learning as well, and publishers are learning. So I think that awareness is growing at all levels, which is evolving the industry. So, for example, I think my hope would be that no, it's not just about, well, we'll just leave one publishing group to deal with this. And it's about, it doesn't really matter who the publisher is. It's about, if you're going to be representing a particular topic, how do we do this in the most respectful and the most accurate way? And usually that's going to mean either involving the people who are from that culture or from that region, or having a cultural consultant who specializes and is able to kind of understand all of that. So I think I don't think it's a matter of like, well, we should only have certain publishers doing certain things. It's just like anyone can approach it in the really positive, good, wholesome, respectful way. Yeah.
Right. It just feels like I haven't seen any other games coming.
Well,
I mean, okay, excuse me, folks, Euro games, because that's what I play. Mm-hmm. So other games such as war games, or maybe even thematic games might be in that space, but I have not seen them. And I don't believe they're in the BGG top 100.
Yeah. So, and again, and I obviously don't understand everything that goes behind a game going into the top 100, but obviously a lot of it is the mass appeal and the mass production of different things. I think overall with that, we do have games like, for example, Maracaibo, like that's actually, like that's in Venezuela. That's where I'm from. So we do have that. And there's
the first one was like,
exactly,
Alexander,
and I
what are you
that.
doing?
Yeah, I actually flagged it on what's, and that was my first kind of introduction to that dissonance, that kind of going, wait a second, I was excited because like, I'm representing, this is where I'm from, and then you start looking and going, none of these people look like any of the people from the, from what I know and from what I experienced and from what I learned and from what would have been the case. And so then so that's sort of that and again, this was still like, we're still kind of going back a few years where like I'm going to say like my bar of expectations was still kind of lower, and like there's more kind of tolerance for going, wait a second, this doesn't quite add up for me as the person from that place experiencing that. And so to the point where like, it doesn't, that's where I sort of started to get that sense of like, there's something that doesn't feel right or quite right about this for me. And obviously there's been and I haven't actually played with the new implementation of is it Uprising or
there's a picture of me in it.
Oh really? Oh
yes,
wow.
really he actually put me and my name on one of the cards.
That's nice.
Well, I'm not really sure why, but I think it's because of the alma mater discussion, where and I think he read that and realized what he was doing which
Mhm.
is, just
Yeah.
completely coming to this as a European. We're going to make
Mm.
money. We're going to
Mm.
have plantations. Oh,
Right.
Alexander, who's on the plantations?
Yeah. Yeah. So I
That
think that point of view of shifting the point of view and making it say, well, if you really try, like, who are you trying to celebrate, or who are you trying to, what's the point that you're making with the game? So what's the point of view of the game as a designer, and what's the takeaway message that you want the gamer to have? Because yeah, obviously we all want people to have fun experiencing that, but they are a vehicle for a story. You're communicating a story in one way or another. So what is that takeaway message? So I feel like this new reshifting it, or refocusing it, so it's, well, what's the perspective of the people there, kind of pushing back and fighting back, defending
exactly
your land, and like
context.
that is so compelling. It's kind of like, why would you tell why would you tell a story? And again, I'm not huge on Star Wars, but it's kind of like telling the Star Wars story from Darth Vader's side, and that being the only story
Right.
that you
Yeah.
tell. It's like, well, but it's so much more compelling to tell the story of the people kind of fighting and trying to defend and fight. And so why wouldn't we do that? It's like, well, so, and obviously that's a bit of a strange comparison to
No,
draw,
but
and
I totally
it
get
can
it.
be
I
very
totally.
compelling, yeah, as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, but know what the story is that you're telling, and make sure that that's what comes through in the game, and that it's clear from
Right.
me kind of grabbing that box, going, this is what I'm going into. This is how I'm suspending my disbelief, or this is what I'm embodying.
Right.
So
Right.
there's no,
And the
yeah, there's
whole, I don't know, the whole thing. I love Maracaibo the game. Honestly,
mm-hmm,
it was a great game. We played it a lot, but I'm like, look, this plantation card's got to go, right?
mm-hmm,
So, I mean, literally, I took it out. It was
yeah,
just way, way
yeah,
over the top on the,
mm, yeah.
insulting. So, but it's really interesting that you came from that area, right? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And so that's where you kind of go, oh, you have that. And that's a sort of 1-2 sort of punch where you're excited, you're more excited than the average person, because it's like, oh, this is
right.
celebrating. And then to have it not be right, it's like, oh, it's like even more
Uh,
disappointing that if I just went in
right.
there not knowing what this is, and then coming
Yeah.
away with like, well, I don't know, like I'm assuming that's right. So for example, that example I was talking about with things like Zolkin, where even like the designers have acknowledged that, yeah, there was a combination of cultures were actually mixed and matched, and so it's not really accurately representing one thing. And even the deities and the like, so those are the kind of things that then, if I don't know any better, which I actually don't have full cultural understanding of the Aztecs and the
Sure.
Mayas to I'm not a historian. But
Yeah.
if I kind of go in and I don't really know that much more about it, my assumption is that this is going to be accurate. Like this is actually, and so
Right.
that ends up
Right.
being all I learn about that. And I don't
Right.
necessarily know how much cultural, like how much a creative license was taken. Because sometimes it's like, well, there's an element that graphically is more attractive. So this will look cool if we add it in there. But it's like, is that accurate? Is that not accurate?
Right.
And
Well,
so, yeah.
the other thing is detail, of course, and Euro
Mm.
games are by definition abstract.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're always going to lose, and I don't mean, that it's okay to eliminate 5 of the 8
Yeah.
gods, but what I'm saying is that you can represent, let's say if there were 8 gods, and you could
Mm.
represent them all abstractly versus, chopping half of them out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, does anyone make a Greek mythology game with only, Zeus and Hera? You know what I mean? So,
Mm. And it's an opportunity to learn more. So it's like, why not actually engage? And
yeah,
the assumption, the acknowledgement there was, again, and it was sort of an earlier time, let's say, where
of
the concept
course.
of cultural consultants wasn't as wildly known or as wildly used as now. So it's like, why not use, now that we know better and now that we have
Right,
access to all of these resources, why not use this as a great opportunity to actually learn some really cool, accurate stuff around that, and even some
right,
takeaway moral stories, or like there's it's as you were saying, it's like it's an opportunity to
right.
actually add to bring that culture alive, as opposed to then just kind of, well, we kind of slap it on, and yeah, we did a little bit of research, but that research might be
Yeah,
just like
and
I
then
went
we've
on
got this
Google and
cool, right, exactly.
yeah. So
Now,
it's a mixed
I do have
opportunity.
another question for you.
Mhm.
Would you like to do you care about the theme setting,
Mhm.
historical, current, future, does that matter?
I think personally, I know that I love, like, theme is one of the main things that
Of
will attract
course.
me to a game. So I don't personally have a preference as to, like, I do like I, it's like I can tell I don't know what I don't know. It's like when you see a movie trailer and you go, that
Right.
looks amazing, but
Right.
I would have never thought of it. So
Right.
I don't think I come to it with a preference of, oh
Okay.
well, I'll only
Okay.
play this type of historical game. I'll only play future games. I'll only play. It's like I want a variety of
Right.
games, and so I
Exactly.
think even from a representation point, I'm even not that limited or that specifically kind of caught up in, oh, where specifically does it take place, if because so much of it can take place in, like, fantasy areas or
Right. Mm-hmm.
fictitious sort of areas, which is like, that's fine. I can still lose myself into it. I think there's a layer of, do I see myself represented in it, and what does that myself actually mean? So again, it's that diversity of genders, that diversity
Right.
of races, diversity of,
Right.
so the way that people look, the way that people present, the way that people identify, it's like that. There's so much room for that
Right.
to be
Exactly.
in games.
We should be looking
Mm.
forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Although
Yeah.
when you mentioned cultural consultants, I will
Mhm.
point out, I don't know if you played Golem.
I have actually. I only played it once, so I don't
Yes.
actually have like a full. Yeah, yeah. But I know
Okay,
that it's
so
based. Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a Jewish
Hmm.
consultant, I guess, that
Yeah,
they tried to work with, and he was
yeah.
angry because all of the persecution of Jews isn't
Mm.
represented in the game,
Right. Okay.
and he was very annoyed at that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Which is
and
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it is, right? And
Mm.
so, and then, you look at this new Ghana game from
Hmm.
Uwe Rosenberg, right?
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so see, the Jewish consultant felt that Cranio was taking advantage and making money.
Mm.
And
Hmm. Yeah.
would you look at that, from the new Uwe Rosenberg Ghana game? Are they, is this profit or is this representation,
Mm.
or,
Yeah.
where are we in this discussion? And it's very, at least for me, it's very
Mm.
complex, but I will probably
Absolutely. Yeah.
always
Mm.
lean on the side of representation because it lets us know they're there.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Uwe's game is going to, wow, Ghana, really? What's that
Mm.
about? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Versus
Yes. Yeah.
his
Yeah.
normal, okay, Uwe, it's sheep again. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually, because even one of the animals, we're like, what is one of the meeples? It's like, what, we're trying to figure out what the animal was, in a conversation that we were having. It's like, what is that animal? And it's only listed as wild, like wild animal tokens. And it's like, well, and it's clearly an odd sort of, it's not your average kind of animal shape. And so we're like, and again, so this is where I think, not having looked at it in a lot of detail, it's, if you're representing a real place and you're representing, like, for example, real flora and fauna of a place,
Right. Mm-hmm.
again, it's an opportunity, it's an opportunity to actually, like, go that extra mile and
Say
give
what it
us
is.
some, like, well, give us, like, it's an, yeah, and knowing that in the past, for example, like, I really appreciate when there's appendix of adding to the story of,
Right.
was this
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
world at the time, or this is what these things were used for, or this is what, and when that's well researched and it comes from, a respectful place, it's like, well, that's great. And that's where the risk of not bringing in a cultural consultant is that, even with the best of intentions, and I don't think any designer goes out there trying to intentionally misrepresent a culture, it's usually done out
Yeah,
of a
but
blind spot and out of, like,
see,
but this is what I mean. So it's like, you may not realize the impact of, because you don't know what you don't know. You may not realize that by you assuming or adding this thing instead of this other thing, the net effect of that is not at all what you intend, or is actually can be misrepresenting or misleading. And so that's where I think the role of having good consultation
right.
that knows, that understands that area, can help mitigate against that risk, and it can actually make the game a lot better for everyone
Right.
involved. Yeah.
Right. I would argue that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pfister, Alexander Eric Pfister, had to know he was coming to Maracaibo from a European point of view. Now,
Mm.
maybe he's used to that, and maybe
Yeah.
that's all, you know what I mean? But he
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah. Yeah.
need a cultural consultant to know that there were brown people there.
Mm.
You see
Mm.
what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, look
Yeah.
now, you know dang well there's brown people there, and you
Mm.
know why Europeans were there. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what's up with that, right? I mean, come on,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
look, Maggie, our time is about up. You know,
Huh.
I love, frankly, I'd love to talk with you for another 2 hours. But
Yeah.
I pride myself on trying to have videos that are in nice, shortish chunks so
Yeah.
that people will watch the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So, and the other thing is too is if you would, I know that you are a lesbian, and that's
Hmm.
fine. It's not that we didn't, folks. I just want you to know that we didn't deliberately not include that. I know with my previous vlog with my friend Lorna. Lorna
Hmm.
is also married to a woman, and
Hmm.
so I want to get that representation discussion.
Yeah.
I think separately.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's not that
Yeah.
I ignore it in
Yeah.
any.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but
We can't cover all the topics in just the
right,
one
and so
conversation.
I will have you back, and we will talk about that and
Sounds good.
in board games.
Sounds
Okay,
good. Thank you for that.
okay,
Thanks for the chat. Mm.
yeah, and thank you. I'm just like, oh, I can't believe
Oh,
it.
it's far too kind.
All right, so you have a nice evening, day, night. I don't
Day.
know.
So it's yeah, middle of the day here. It's
Okay,
coming
well
to
then.
lunchtime now.
Oh, okay, then you have a great afternoon, and thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right, bye bye.